Hello and welcome to this episode of the Journey to Truth Bomb, the podcast. I'm your host, Amy, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about gossip. Okay, so let's just take a moment right here, right now, to feel into what comes up for us when we hear the word gossip. What changes, if any, happen in your body? Do you maybe catch your breath a bit? Do you tense? You can you feel spaces of tension, clenching, twitching in your body? Do you get flutters in your stomach? Do you have any thoughts, feelings, memories, scenarios, individuals that come to your mind when you hear this word? Does it feel good to hear this word? Or do you feel guarded? Do you feel a need to defend yourself? And the reason I'm asking you to feel into this is because I am aware of the weight, so to speak, that the word gossip has, especially in association to women. Our society, our media is really good at portraying gossips to be women. And the reason I'm bringing this podcast topic to you, or one of the reasons I'm bringing it to you, is because over the last few weeks, I've been having some fabulous conversations. Like, I'm really, really honored to have really deep, meaningful, loving connections, conversations with so many different amazing women. And there was a week not long ago where within 5 days, I had 4 separate conversations with women. And within those conversations, the women that I was speaking to apologized for gossiping or for potentially gossiping or for being perceived as a gossip. And these conversations were anything but bitchy. They weren't bitchy, they weren't nasty, they were just filled with love and support, and protection is definitely a word that would come to mind when I think about the conversations. And wanting to protect the person who they were talking about, or through the information that they were sharing, to keep other women safe. And it really made me sit up and think, because I am talking all the time about wanting to change the narrative about women's health and well-being to a more positive and informed one. So when a word comes up, such as gossip, where there's so much negativity attached to it, relating to women, like, language is how we communicate. So when this word comes up, where there's all this weight on it, all this negativity, specifically towards women, it gets me curious. And I started to look up the origin of gossip and how it became so messed up and like icky and horrible for women in particular. And this is what I'm going to share with you in this episode, because it's so interesting, so interesting. So yeah, after I'd had these conversations, I was just like, this is so interesting that these women are apologizing for gossiping, and apologizing for speaking, like for sharing their voice. Yeah, so I started having conversations with friends and colleagues about, oh, what do you think to gossiping? And like looking at other people's content around gossiping. And I actually listened to a podcast from a woman who, I love her podcast. I really, really enjoy listening to her podcast. And I saw one pop up on my Spotify that she'd done about gossiping. And I was like, oh, I got all excited about it. And I listened to it and I was really, really like taken aback by it because she was very much, you shouldn't gossip. Gossip is a really bad thing. There just should be no space for it. I haven't got time for it. Like, this is just not happening. This is not a thing. And it like this clear, like, no, it's such a bad thing. Like the message was like, oh, okay. Like, why do we think that about this specific word? So I've got my notes here. I've been on the internet, I've done some research, and this is what I have discovered. And I'm going to share it with you in this podcast because I think it's so important that we understand the history behind some of the challenges that women are facing. And the shifts and the changes that have been brought about, and the role of the patriarchy within that. Okay, so I'm going to start with a dictionary definition of gossip. Yes, that's what I'm going to do. I've got it here. Okay, so the definition that I've got is a casual or unconstrained conversation or report about other people, typically involving details that are not confirmed to be true. Okay, so it's this piece about the information potentially not being true, which would lead to hurt and all of the negative stuff. And the word gossip can be seen to be traced back to the 12th century, where it's associated with an Old English term, godsib. That's Godsib. So think of God and sibling mashed together. And this is very much how we would see a godparent role today. So a godmother, a godfather, someone who has a religious responsibility towards somebody. So there's very much this religious roots in the word. And as time developed, it went on to mean a friend or a sibling who you could tell anything to, who you could confide in. And that was both male and female. So it moved away from the religious aspect of it to being for anybody who you could trust, really, and confide in. And over the 17th to the early 19th century, we see this move away from the divine origins that I've just talked about, like the religious starting point of it, to where we can see it become more of what we associate it with today, which is, gossip mongering, idle talk, sharing secrets, being unkind, all these kind of things. And it really started getting associated with females because the term became associated with the practice of women coming together to support women in their community in childbirth. And giving birth back in the day was a big social event, and it was exclusively attended by women. So the pregnant woman's female relatives and neighbors and friends, like community members, would congregate in the bedroom of the woman who was giving birth to support her through the process. And part of that support included idle conversation. And this is really important because it's showing the need and the importance of connection. One of the 5 foundations of health and well-being that I talk about, having this connection to others, to our peers, to our friends, to our families, having that support network. And this is very much what we're talking about now, like these women coming together, supporting each other through the childbirth. And really, as time went on, it wasn't just the birth time that the women would come together. The word got associated with that particular event, but women would also come together in the community to do chores together, they would look after each other's children. You know, we're in like the Middle Ages now, so you have your women very much the homemakers and the men very much in the politics world, like in the business side of things, like providing the food, sorting out the land, ownership, all of these kind of things. And in terms of connection and community, gossip really helped women to bond and to show affection to one another. And it played a really important role in women getting to know who they could trust. You know, you really needed to know who you could rely on, who you could trust in order to stay alive. That was very much the case back in the Middle Ages, like more than it is today, like on a physical, actually staying alive point of view. You really needed to know that you could trust the individual who had to do the role that they were asked to do to keep the community safe. So being able to talk to other women and build confidences and know who they could trust was really, really important in keeping them safe. And this is very much the case today because our nervous systems need connection in order to feel safe. And gossip, talking to other women, talking to people around us, helps us to feel safe. So it's not only that it was really important back then, but it's really, really important now for us to have a network of, you know, people that we can confide in. Going back to that earlier definition, having a friend, a sibling, a relative who you can be vulnerable with, who you can confide in. And yeah, the women would come together, they would do the laundry together, like cook together, care for kids together, talk about keeping the land safe when the men were away, all of these things. So their talk, their conversation, like we're calling this gossip, but back then these are conversations, this is connection between women that we are talking about, were really, really important. But over time, the men, hello patriarchy, became concerned about these women's circles and these gatherings, so to speak, as they felt that the matters that they were discussing in these circles, in these connection times, in these spaces together as women, held no regard for their public eye, for their politics that they were creating. And the men became to worry that if the women gained too much confidence, they could get too much power and potentially rise up and challenge these rules, these politics, these like, you know, regulations that they were putting in place. And this was a worry to the men as they were developing their structures. And this is how the negativity around gossip was born, really, because the men were worried that the women would have too much power if they let them carry on having these connections and, you know, working things out for themselves, so to speak. And this is where we get the association of gossiping with witches. And I think a lot of you will know about the witch hunts and the witch trials and the horrendous things that happened then. But eventually, over time, the men started to make laws to prevent women from gossiping, prevent women from having these connection circles, from having friendships, from challenging the men, challenging their husbands. And it became law that they couldn't meet either in their homes or in public. And I'm just going to read this here that I've got written down. In 1547, a proclamation was issued forbidding women to meet together to babble and talk, ordering husbands to keep their wives in their houses. If women didn't rejoice in their newfound captivity, they would put themselves at risk and could be accused of being a witch. And during trials, they were encouraged, normally under the penalty of torture, to snitch on their friends, their sisters, their mothers, and their daughters. So the men came in, the patriarchy came in, they created laws and restrictions against women coming together to support each other, to make each other feel safe, to create that connection that we need to keep the nervous system safe. And all of a sudden, women were not only at risk themselves, but at risk of, you know, accusing or dobbing in their loved ones, their friends, their sisters, their mothers, all of these things. And if a woman was seen guilty of gossiping or simply standing up for herself, so speaking her truth, this is where I come back to, women apologizing for having a voice, for speaking out, for speaking what's on their heart, speaking what they believe. They were at risk of severe punishment. And these were punishments were just absolutely chuffing hideous and brutal, absolutely brutal. They could include, something as severe as death, being burned at the stake, being drowned, all of the things that we know they did to witches. But also, there was the scold's bridle and the gossip's bridle. And oh my God, honestly, I'm just like my whole body is responding to this because it was just so awful. And if you were seen to be nagging or constantly displeased by your husband or by men or any man in general, you would be forced to wear the scold's bridle, the gossip's bridle. And these are horrendous bits of metal headpieces. So it's like a horse wears a bridle. It was like a metal head cage that came into basically clamped over the woman's head, and it had a piece around the mouth where if the woman spoke, she would risk cutting her mouth and her tongue. They were incredibly uncomfortable, hugely demoralizing and embarrassing. And actually, in 1567 in Edinburgh, is the first recorded use of one of these bridles. And what would happen is if you were found to be guilty of nagging or speaking out of line or, not following your husband's ordered or a man's ordered, you'd be given this bridle to wear, and your husband would pay your slave or not necessarily pay, but instruct your housekeeper, like your slave, whatever it was, like to literally walk you around the town like a dog on a lead with this bridle on, where you would be publicly shamed and spat on and all of these horrible things. And this is just for women speaking. Like, how powerful is this when we think of how much women fear to use their voice? Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, all of the negativity that women have around speaking out, apologizing for potentially being seen as a gossip, all of this is ingrained in us. Like, it's ancestral trauma that we have from women being treated this way and being controlled this way by the patriarchy. Okay. And obviously men gossip. Men did it. Like, they still do. We still got, like, women gossip, men gossip, but they were gossiping back then as well. But obviously their gossip was important, and it was necessary. Women were jobless, and therefore only other women took them seriously. Men had this hierarchical system that they were creating, and they felt that their networking, their gossiping was a form of networking, it was productive, and that it was a valid pastime for men to gossip. Like it was okay for them to do it. But for women, it was nasty, it was dangerous, and it was threatening. So it needed to be stopped. Yeah, so this just blew my mind when I found all of this out. I can't say it surprised me because, you know, um, it's the patriarchy, like it's the patriarchal imprint on women that is repressing us and creating these narratives that I've talked about, like creating these negative narratives. So now that when women talk to each other, it's seen as gossip, and the definition there at the beginning about it being untrue, that typically involving details that are not confirmed as being true. That definition has come all the way from like the 16th century. That's where that's come from. And I am going to say now that I think it's time we redefined gossip as women, because gossip is a good thing. Gossip, as in talking, sharing our thoughts, our feelings, our vulnerability, the information that we have for each other, is a really good thing. And we shouldn't be apologizing for doing it. And research has shown us that when we talk amongst our friends, we release hormones that, the serotonin, the oxytocin, and they help us create emotional connection, which is so important. And we all know, like thinking about our nervous systems and living in our bodies for a moment, if you think about that, we know how good it feels to get something off your chest. Like literally, that's the saying, isn't it? To get it off your chest. It's a weight off my shoulders. To have a safe space where you can go to a friend, a trusted person, and really have a good vent. And doing that, just having that space to vent out, oh gosh, it helps you release the stress, it helps you release the anxiety, and it helps you to feel better. And, when we are talking about other people, and I'm not talking about sharing untruths here, I'm not talking about like, making stories up. That's not the gossip I'm talking about. But when we're talking about other people, that's important too. Because if we are to share with somebody how another individual has hurt us, and this is one of the contexts that I'm referring to at the beginning of the call when I was saying I was having the conversations I was having with the women, where the apology for gossiping came up. If you are sharing how another individual has hurt you, when you're listening to somebody share that, you are helping to provoke understanding and empathy from the individuals who are listening to you. It's allowing you to understand how that person feels. And if someone has done something to you that has made you feel unsafe or undervalued, and someone else shares that with you from a space of protection, and the example that's coming up here is if you were to, potentially be going on a date with an individual and you were to ask somebody if they knew them and what they thought of them. If someone has had a bad experience with that person and they weren't to share it, if that was deemed as gossip, this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about being deemed as gossip, not untruths. I'm talking about firsthand, like factual information that you are sharing. You can help protect that person. You can help to create safety for them and avoid them having a potentially negative experience. So gossiping, connection, sharing experiences, sharing our experiences with each other, our experiences with each other, with other people, like sharing our connection and our time and our thoughts and our feelings with people is a really, really valid way of connecting and communicating and allowing ourselves to feel safe, allowing us to use our power, use our voice as women, like know that your voice has power. Sharing your thoughts and your feelings, and I'm gonna say like your blueprint, your intuition, speaking out about your intuition, because I can absolutely believe that men were scared of women's intuition. Because when women get together, it's powerful, especially if they're being like true to their intuition. Like it's a really powerful thing. And I can see how that is threatening. Back in the day that would have been threatening for the men. And it still is today. But we can live side by side, like men and women being open and sharing our voices and sharing our wisdom. And a lot of the time, because of this fear of being seen as a gossip or being seen as, judged, or, the ancestral wound of potentially being burnt at the stake or having to sacrifice your siblings, like being tortured to sacrifice your siblings, your female family members. All of this has had an imprint on women, and we've learned to keep quiet, to not speak up, to not talk and share our thoughts and our feelings and our beliefs and our experiences, and to speak out when things aren't right. And this is such a huge part of health and well-being for women as well. We have a healthcare system that is not equipped to care for us because it doesn't understand our needs, because it's been built by a patriarchy, it's been built by the men, but not understanding how the female body works. And yeah, listening to women apologize for talking, for sharing their experiences, to me, hurt. To apologize for potentially gossiping, I felt it didn't feel right for me that these women were doing this. And then when I went and researched what I've just researched and what I've just shared, no flipping wonder we have these problems, women, like that we know this, that we feel like this. So I want to just highlight from what I've shared today that there's always a deeper narrative to what you are experiencing on the surface. Something as flippant as apologizing for gossiping, or, oh, I don't like gossiping and I'm not one to gossip, like all of these preempts that I hear people say quite a lot. There's always a reason for that. And a lot of the time, it can be some trauma that you've experienced either firsthand or through your ancestral line. So, there's no wonder, like when all of our ancestors have been oppressed in this way through speaking up, like just using their voice, it's no wonder that we are, when we're growing into women, when we're going through puberty, is there any wonder that we're all a bit bitchy and we're all a bit gossipy? And, like when you throw in the factor that the media and society has us saying that we have to look a certain way, or, all of the pressure that we have about how we should look and what we should sound like, and all the other pieces that, what our hair color we should be and how fat and thin and all the rest of it, like all of those pieces added on. Is it any wonder that we all get a little bit gossipy and we all get a little bit bitchy in our teenage years? And, many of us grow out of it and many of us don't. There's a lot of women I know today who my age and older, and they're still trapped in that gossip, like nasty gossiping space. So I just want you to bring the light on gossiping because I want us to redefine it. I want us to remove that last sentence. It's okay for us to talk and communicate and connect and to share our vulnerabilities and to share our experiences with people that we love and trust. If it's coming from a place of, love and growth and protection, it's not okay for us to make up stories and bitch and lie and all of like the nasty pieces around gossip. That's not okay. That's absolutely not okay. But and gossip doesn't have to be bad news either. Like that's the other piece. You can be sharing someone else's success. Like I love it when other women, well, men and women, but talking about women in this podcast, when other women are doing well for themselves, when they're succeeding, when something fantastic's happening for them. And I want to share that with other people. I want to like keep that energy vibration high. I want to um positively gossip in that way. So gossip doesn't have to be all talking like negative things at all, because I don't believe it's as clear as negative and positive. Because when you're sharing a negative experience, you can do that to help people to learn and protect. And one example I've got there is if I have a friend come to me and they're going through a situation, or I'm going through a situation and I'm telling them about it and saying I'm having such a hard time because I'm trying to navigate this and I don't know what to do. And they might say, oh, actually, I had a friend or I knew somebody who went through something similar, and this is how she helped navigate. Like, this is what helped her. This might help you. Is that gossip? I don't I think it is, but it's not like the gossip in the negative, nasty way. So I don't think I'm being overly clear here, but what I'm saying is I think we should redefine gossip, and we should gossip because gossip is good as long as it's not the nasty, bitchy, horrible gossip. And yeah, like take our power back, use our voices, start connecting more as women, start bringing our wisdom together and sharing our knowledge and our experiences. And yeah, like just redefine it. Stop apologizing and share what you need to share with love to those that you love. So I would love to hear your thoughts, your like what comes up for you from this episode, because to me, like my mind is, you can probably tell I'm all over the place at the moment. Like my mind is blown by this, that we have bought into this negative narrative around gossip from something that was implemented by the patriarchy back in the 16th century, and it's still creating wounds today for women, still tearing women apart. And yeah, like let's use our power, ladies. Let's like maybe we should start a hashtag like gossiping for good or gossip for good or something, just to reclaim the power of gossip done right. Okay, so I'm gonna love you and leave you there. And thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you want to gossip to your friends about this episode and share it with them, please do. I would love to hear your thoughts and your like anything that's coming up for you around this, or any other word. That'd be another good thing as well. If there's any other word or phrase that you think, why do we say that? Like, what's that all about? Especially if it's tied in with women as well. And I could look at doing an episode to unpick that. And also, super important, if there's anything I've missed out, if there's anything that you know about gossip and the origins and its journey, please let me know because I'm so fascinated by this topic. Yeah, anyway, love you and leave you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will catch you in the next episode. Lots of love. Bye.